Welcome to the third dimension. Yemen has seen significant shifts in its political and security landscape in recent months. The efforts of the Southern Transitional Councils, the STC, to expand their control over southeastern governorates of Hadramaut and Al-Mahra in early December were met with military pushback from Yemen's government forces and Saudi Arabia. In January the 10th, Rashad Al-Alimi, the head of the Presidential Leadership Council, said that the government had regained full control of Hadramaut and Al-Mahra, as well as the interim capital of Aden. The United Nations Special Envoy stressed that the future of South Yemen cannot be determined by any single actor or through force. The Southern Transitional Council territory in Yemen was reduced to practically nothing and declared its dissolution. This drama marked the first direct military confrontation between forces backed by the two major Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and UAE, whose cooperation has shaped Yemen's security architecture for over a decade. To discuss this topic joins me Nicholas Brumfield. Mr. Brumfield is a maritime security expert and a senior Yemen analyst. Nick, good to have you in my show again.
Thank you for having me again.
Okay. Now, if we start with this, Nick, since 2015, Yemen was a confrontation or a proxy war between the Gulf states and Iran. But if we look at what is happening now, some observers, they say, this risks transforming the Yemeni conflict into what they called a multi-layered regional context. What do you say about this?
So I guess my addition to that would be it's certainly been a multi-layered regional conflict context for a while. However, this does represent a major phase shift both in the Yemen conflict and within the Middle East more broadly. We did have this sort of anti-Houthi coalition versus the Houthis. Now it could increasingly begin to look like a three-way war, although people have been talking about it that way at times for many years now. But it was just this dramatic shift for reversing several years of UAE-backed STC expansion in southern and eastern Yemen in the course of about a week. And so what the exact implications for what that is going to do with regards to what the Gulf states do in Yemen, I think is still playing out, but we saw that play out. And we've subsequently seen similar conflict or showdowns take place across the region between Saudi and Emirati-backed parties, most notably in the Horn of Africa, where, of course, we did see Somalia cancel its agreements with the UAE amid its tensions over Somaliland, although the precipitating incident with regards to that was ostensibly the fact that the UAE used Somali territory to help smuggle Idris al-Zubaydi out of Yemen. But even beyond the Horn of Africa, right, we're seeing similar kind of conflict or tensions at the very least, competition for power playing out in places as far-flung as South Asia. Even within certain GCC member states where you maybe see the Saudis and the Emiratis contesting for influence a little bit more. So this is something that's going to have ripple effects probably into the next couple of years now.
Okay. Now, so away from far-reaching effects in the region and in the Horn of Africa, Nicholas, okay, if we just stick it to Yemen, okay, and it would be interesting to bring a Yemeni observer, Arif al-Muslimi, who has commented on this rivalry, saying this shift is particularly consequential because it signals the collapse of a key pillar of regional coordination around Yemen. My question is, how would such a rift impact Yemen peace process, Nicholas?
Oh, it could have significant impacts depending exactly on how this plays out. So it's well known the UAE was running the ground game in Yemen for the last decade. Saudi Arabia, while the senior partner and engaged, left large swaths of southern Yemen ostensibly to UAE sponsorship. The UAE was the one that built out all of these constellation of armed groups that have at times played very important military roles in fighting the Houthis. So you think about the Giants Brigades in 2018 Hadeda offensive. You think about the intervention in Marib in 2021, 2022 that stopped the Houthi offensive on Marib. Those were all UAE-backed groups, and it really kind of came about as a result of Saudi Emirati cooperation.
Yeah.
And so this most recent conflict appears to have completely destroyed that coordination between the two of them, and in many ways, it's probably not going to come back. And so the main concern, for me at least, looking at this, is Saudi Arabia claiming that these UAE-backed groups were undermining the Yemeni state, and I think it's fair to say that they were. But at the same, it's kind of going to try to push out the UAE, push out the role the UAE has been doing in Yemen for the past decade.
Yeah.
But my concern is that the Saudis may not invest as much in their Saudi partners as the Emiratis did, and that this could in some ways weaken Yemeni government or anti-Houthi forces should the Houthis decide to move south. So so the Saudis have taken over the Giants Brigades. They've moved in nation shield forces, but whether the Saudis are going to be as capable a patron in resisting Houthi incursions in the same way that the Emiratis and the Emirati-backed groups were, I think is an open question and a concern. It is worth saying there are good signs. So we did, with this announcement of economic support from Saudi Arabia, that's a good sign. The announcement of the Supreme Military Committee to integrate all of these armed groups under the aegis of Yemeni government military and security infrastructure. Very good signs. But a lot of what is going to happen is going to depend on how committed Saudi Arabia actually is to revitalizing the ROIG, whether the ROIG is going to be able to reform, rather than the last 2 months essentially being Saudi Arabia kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the STC's advance in eastern Yemen, and then they're going to kind of lose interest again in the next 3 to 6 months. That's really my main concern.
Okay. So this brings us to talk about the anti-Houthi camp under the Houthis, in fact, Nicholas. Now, many people said it's the Houthis, okay, watching this drama are the big winners, okay? And in fact, in your opinion, Nicholas, how would also this, okay, or what does this rift mean for the safety of the Red Sea, as you are a maritime expert?
So so in terms of implications for the Houthis and the Red Sea, I really think it remains to be seen. The Houthis, as you said, have kind of adopted a wait and see attitude with regards to the events in southern Yemen, even when there was some redeployments of military forces away from fronts facing the Houthis. You didn't see them moving to try to take advantage of that too much. So they seem to be adopting we'll see how this plays out as Saudi Arabia gets its ducks in a row in the south. You have seen them sort of make some overtures to the Red Sea recently, and even air traffic. So you did see them publish on January 26th that video about the Marlin Wanda seizure, just to kind of remind people that they're a threat. You saw them stop that flight from Jeddah to Mocha on 1 February. So they're kind of showing that they're around, probably to kind of remind Saudi Arabia that it should probably cut a deal with them. But right now they seem fairly stable, not wanting to rock the boat so much. It's important to note this could very well quickly change as it relates to U.S. tensions with Iran. So if the U.S. were to conduct a major existential attack on Iran, I think that could get the Houthis really riled up. Although more limited strikes, I think they would be fairly symbolic. The Houthi response would be fairly symbolic. And something that I think is getting not talked about enough is this reports of Israel planning another offensive in Gaza in March. And if that takes place, there's almost no doubt in my mind that the Houthis would resume their attacks in the Red Sea. They would resume them against Israel, and they could maybe even start targeting, positions in Somaliland, because they've shown great interest in the growing Israeli presence.
They have stated that publicly, in fact. Okay, when Israel recognized the Somaliland. Okay, now talking always about the Houthis, okay, and how they are benefiting from these cracks within the anti-Houthi camp. On January the 27th, the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution, 28-113, renewing the mandate of the UN mission to support the Hodeidah Agreement, UNMAHA, but for a final extension, 2 months, Now, within this context, Nicholas, does ending, UNMAHA in Hodeidah signify a paradigm shift in the international community's position towards the Houthis?
I think it's part of one. I think it's part of what we're seeing. We've seen, obviously, just massive Houthi harassment against UN workers and assets in areas under their control. World Food Program has already announced that it stopped suspending its operations in northern Yemen or in Houthi-held areas in March. So I think that this is a continuation of the vicious cycle that we've seen play out since over the last couple of years, particularly after the Houthis started abducting UN workers during the Gaza conflict, where the Houthis, either because they genuinely think there's espionage taking place in these organizations, or they just want to get leverage against international organizations, just keep abducting people, and then the international organizations start to pull back, and then the Houthis want to get more leverage, so they abduct more people, so the international organizations pull back even further. As it relates to the UN mission to support the Hodeidah Agreement, that's an interesting institution within Yemen, because there are many people who've been asking, why is it around anyway, right? Because it was established to support the Hodeidah Agreement. The Hodeidah Agreement has been more or less a dead letter since 2021, 2022, following the Saudi-led coalition withdrawal from that front line around Hodeidah. It's done other very useful things. I don't want to disparage the UN mission to support the Hodeidah Agreement, but there have been people who have for a long time been recommending a reconfiguration of that particular institution and its relationship with the Houthis.
Of course, we still remember how council members were not, I would say, agreed on this vote, Nicholas. Interestingly, China and Russia, And if we take the US position in that vote, the US pushed for this, and framing it with what they say the Houthi obstructionism has prevented the mission from fulfilling its mandate. Now, within this debate, Nicholas, some people also, or some Yemen observers say, perhaps the United States is preparing another round for military action against the Houthis, and taking out or withdrawing this UN institution from Hodeidah will make the world look at the Houthis as a terrorist organization and not a warring party. To what extent that assumption remains valid?
It's not necessarily my view. I think it's a plausible view. I do think, I think some people have said that, by removing the UN mission to support a Hodeidah agreement, that could very well lay the groundwork for a Saudi-backed coalition offensive up the West Coast, similar to what they did in 2018, which would be the most vulnerable location for the Yemeni government to push on the Houthis is that location. So I do think that long term that could very well play into it in getting rid of that institution. But as of right now, we're not seeing the kind of military buildup or preparations that are, what remains to be seen, I suppose.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier, Nicholas, the Houthi ongoing crackdown on United Nations aid workers, etc. Okay, and of course, in every single briefing of United Nations officials, okay, they warn that this ongoing crackdown will worsen the humanitarian situation in Yemen. Okay, just yesterday, we heard the United Nations coordinator in Yemen, okay, announcing that humanitarian flights will resume to Sana'a after 1 month halt, and the halt was imposed by the Houthis. In your opinion, okay, this complex relationship between the United Nations and the Houthis, okay, where would it head to, Nicholas?
I think we're going to see earnestly a continuation of deterioration of relations. This isn't just from the Houthi side. There's been massive funding shortfalls at the UN. So the UN just doesn't have the resources to provide the kind of humanitarian support that the Houthis want them to. So there's that aspect of the equation as well. So that just for many years, the UN put up with a lot that the Houthis did to their organizations in Houthi-held areas. I think over the last year or two, just with even just in the last couple of days, right? They raided an office, seized assets. They have 69 UN workers in detention. And I think what you're seeing is a recognition from the international community that, this isn't sustainable. They don't have the resources to sustain it anyway. And, the first principle of humanitarian, aid is to do no harm. And at this point, by employing people in international organizations, you're essentially painting a target on their back. So I do think you're going to see a continued deterioration. The Houthis are going to try to get leverage, but the international organizations are going to continue to pull back until there's a drastic shift in what's happening in Yemen.
Okay. You also mentioned the far-reaching effects of this UAE-Saudi rivalry and reaching the region, and one of it is the Horn of Africa, which is very vital area. And on January the 15th, okay, following Israel's recognition of Somaliland, of course, we all heard the Houthi leader threatening that this will make Israel again a target, or they will also target the Red Sea. You said that it is this kind of announcement is a way that the Houthis are telling the world we are still a threat. But don't you think this could also escalate the situation in the Red Sea again?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think a lot hinges on what happens in Gaza in the next few months, and a lot hinges on what happens in Iran. I think the Houthis are currently biding their time. There may be something that sets them off in the next few months, either Gaza or Iran or something else where they go back to fighting. But right now, I'm taking a lot of what the Houthi leadership is saying with a grain of salt, as I normally do. They do have a tendency to speak very loudly and say a lot of aggressive things, and not necessarily do all of them.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of keeping focused on these big ticket items that I think may set them off. But yeah, in terms of recognition in Somaliland, something with regards to that, it remains to be seen.
Okay. And do you think they are capable of doing their warnings, especially now in view of the US-Iran tensions and this, I would say, degradation of Iran's influence in the region?
So in terms of responding in
yes.
support of Iran?
Yeah.
So I'm actually of the opinion that the Houthis don't seem terribly interested in coming into Iran support. They're definitely major allies. They definitely want to support Iran. But if you look at Houthi leaders' statements over the course of the last couple of weeks, they've expressed solidarity with Iran, but they haven't threatened direct action in the same way that they have for contexts such as Gaza. So I think that if U.S. strikes are minimal or not necessarily threatening the Islamic Republic existentially, you may see the Houthis kind of symbolically, lob a few rockets at Israel, maybe. if things get a bit more protracted, you may see, and for instance, the U.S. starts seizing tankers in the Persian Gulf, you may see the Houthis retaliate in the Red Sea. But the Houthis, looking at their discourse, looking at what they're mobilizing people in Yemen around, their eyes are still kind of firmly fixed on Palestine. And I think that is, if anything, is going to set them off in a way that we go back to 2023 to 2025. It's going to be that rumored Israeli offensive. If they get the green light to do that and they go back into Gaza, you're going to see a return to 2023, 2025.
Okay. Now, a final point, if you may, Nicholas. Okay. Within these increasingly shifting dynamics, what does the future hold for Yemen, Nicholas?
So there's a couple really important variables that we'll see how they play out in the next few months, or even probably a year at the most. The first is this Saudi-backed revitalization of the ROIG, of the Yemeni government. If they're able to pull that off, if they're able to revitalize the ROIG, give it good resources, build institutions, build military forces, you could really. But it is incredibly fragile, and a lot of it depends on the ROIG's or the Yemeni government's ability to overcome long-standing issues in governance, within itself, and a lot of it depends on Saudi Arabia's continued interest, which isn't guaranteed. They're very interested right now, and while they're very interested, the Yemeni government, I think, is going to see better days than it has. But if in 6 months they decide, okay, we don't want to spend another $1 billion on the Central Bank of Yemen and Aden, we don't want to, pay for all of these, military units, things could go really sideways. So, so a lot depends on whether, they're able to push that through and really affect change, or if they're going to sort of fall back into scenarios where we saw maybe 2018, 2019, where the Yemeni government was disunified. Only this time, you're not necessarily going to have UAE-backed forces in southern Yemen who are able to fight the Houthis in the same way. So I think that's important. So the related variable is, of course, this Saudi-backed southern initiative to try to sort of get all of the different southern movement groups, sort of talking to each other and coming up with a solution to the southern issue in Yemen.
Even that southern group's dialogue was also delayed.
Postponed. So this is all very fragile, and I don't want to be raining on anybody's parade, but it could very well go badly to the extent that you may see pro-STC insurgencies. So we've seen attacks. We're not out of the woods yet with regards to the Yemeni government, and it could very well go south. Currently, things look all right, and they maybe going in a better direction than they were 2 to 3 months ago. But it could very much go badly. And then the sort of third set of everything is the international environment. And if Gaza goes up, if Iran goes up, and the Houthis start engaging in all these international attacks, then we're back to 2023, 2025, and it gets very hairy to try to restart any kind of process whereby even if you did have a revitalized ROIG that can maybe push on the Houthis, to get leverage, you're not necessarily going to be able to get a peace process going because of the international conflict. So there's a lot of variables that could go either way, in a good way or a bad way, and we'll be looking into them into the coming future.
And it's Yemeni civilians who pay all these. Nicholas. This brings us to the end of this interview. Nicholas, thank you so much for your time and insights, and thank you for talking to Yemen Today TV.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for this time. See you next week with a new edition of The Third Dimension.